The LOX, a group that as of recent has been getting their flowers and just due. They've been around for years and people have had a lot of admiration and respect for them throughout the years, but I think that we all know what happened to get them more in the spotlight once again. RIP, my beloved Dipset. You will be missed. But I think that it's time for us to do a rewind and recap of their careers. And I'm talking about the LOX, of course. People have been asking me to do this video for a while. I would say ever since my Dipset video, which I did like a year ago and way before their Verzuz. We're here now and I hope you guys enjoy the content that I'm about to bring you. But before I get more into the video, I would first like to thank you guys for coming to see this, because you guys can be doing a million other things right now, but instead you're here with me and I appreciate that. If you guys like the content, you guys should like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Also follow my Instagram too, that would be greatly appreciated. Comment down below your favorite song from the LOX, favorite verse, lyric, album, etc. Also, let me know where you are tuning in from as well. Represent where you're from. Alright, without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Before the LOX ever became a thing, Jada, Sheek, and Styles would grow up in Yonkers, New York. We'll get into the significance of Yonkers later, but Jadakiss would start rapping at an early age, and he put Sheek on the rapping because they grew up not that far from each other. Meanwhile, Styles P lived on the south side of Yonkers but heard the buzz that Sheek and Jada were making on the other side of town. Jada and Sheek actually used to make tapes with local DJs back then. Styles didn't meet them until junior high. While in high school, the three would be involved in a rap group called the Bomb Squad. This is around the time Styles would be working for a company and he stole a bunch of cassette tapes that the crew would then sell the tapes for $15 a piece with their music on it. They began to really buzz in Yonkers. After this, they started making more songs and got in tune with this group called the Mushmen, who elevated their production and their overall game. The Mushmen would then connect them with the main source, and this is what Jada had to say about this. We were going to sign with the main source. We were like teenagers, but it didn't work out. But before we did the deal, we did the song with them. It was pretty much like a LOX session. They had the beat and we went to Long Island somewhere in the studio. We sat with the beat for like 30 minutes and laid the song. This is referring to the 1994 song Set It Off, which appeared on Main Source's album F What You Think. Some people note this as one of the first introductions a lot of people had to what would become the LOX, because Sheek and Jada would appear on this track. By 1994, the group was no longer Bomb Squad and instead were going by the name the Warlocks at the time. As Sheek would say in his verse in the song, "Watch your back for the Warlocks hit the street." But back to the story, and the LOX would actually sign a production deal with the Mushmen, which didn't go all that great for them. The LOX were really green to the business, and in an interview, Sheek would say this dealing with the Mushmen is when the group first discovered how shady some people in the industry are and were, but later on in the story, we'll see this wouldn't be the last time that the group had to deal with some similar situations. But some additional history with the LOX is that before they got on, Styles P was actually in and out of jail. He was a teenager the first time he got put in the county and got arrested for a gun and some armed robberies, but he only got charged for the weapon. At this point, the group was already working on music, and Styles was eager to get out and start working, but when he got out, he got arrested a month later. He got locked up in a raid with some dope and was now facing another felony, but the raid was deemed illegal, so it got dropped to a misdemeanor according to Styles. He would now be put on probation and began focusing on music. But let's get back to the story, and it was D and Y Dean who got the LOX out of this deal. They were now under their management, and comes the question of why weren't the LOX fully Rough Riders from the beginning? Well, that's because this was before the Rough Rider Def Jam deal, and Y and Dean weren't on yet, so they brought Mace and the LOX to Diddy. Side note, when I asked what I should include in this video, I was told that Mace was almost a member of the LOX, and I kinda called BS at first, but I did some research and Sheek Louch did an interview with Doggy Diamonds that for now isn't available, but there's multiple articles saying that Sheek said that Mace was almost a member, so I feel that that's something really interesting and something to note, and would have been crazy if it actually would have happened. Sometime around this time though, the LOX caught a big break because of Mary J. Blige. Her cousin Jamarco was one of the initial members of the Bomb Squad that I talked about earlier. The LOX gave him some stuff and they gave it to Mary, which eventually got in the hands of Diddy during one of Jadakiss' tours. Diddy at the time was looking for a rap group, and here's a clip of the demo that was played to Diddy.
I let it marinate, then I go strike again. But this time I get the guts with the Mac 10. Rag tag, body bag, zip them up, Lord. Another day, another murder, life goes on.
Jazz O actually did production on this demo, for those who know who that is, which I had no clue that he actually did that, but this demo would lead the LOX to get signed by Bad Boy. Suge Knight actually wanted the LOX on death row at one point, according to Sheek. Now that is truly wild in my opinion. The LOX on death row at that time, that would have been insane. But I would get them not wanting to go out west. Comment down below if y'all would have liked the LOX on death row instead of Bad Boy. Let's get back to the Yonkers thing, and at this point in time, there wasn't really anybody really big from Yonkers in the rap game outside of Yonkers. And for those who might say DMX, well, we're talking about 1995, 1996, and if you watched my DMX 1998 video, you would already know that he was out way before he dropped his debut album, because he appeared in Unsigned Hype in The Source back in 1991, but he didn't become the man that we know him as of today until 1998. Before that, he was the man in Yonkers though, while the LOX were still in high school, because DMX is older, and at this point in the story, he wasn't super duper big yet outside of Yonkers. Mary J. Blige was big, but for one, she wasn't a rapper and wasn't really repping Yonkers like how the LOX would end up doing later on. But anyways, the LOX would sign with Diddy after they went to his office and rapped for him. A week later, they were signed. Here's what Jadakiss had to say about this. When we signed with Bad Boy, they were like the Chicago Bulls. They were like the Lakers in the early 80s. It was a no-brainer. Big was there. The whole world was trying to get next to B.I. He embraced us, so that was a priceless feeling. Being with Diddy, the mogul of moguls, and Biggie, the lyricist of lyricists, that's a sandwich that you want to be a part of. Biggie took an interest in them, and the song that we know today as You'll See was recorded before the LOX even met Biggie officially. And actually, the LOX has talked about how they think that Biggie dissed them on the track. But Jadakiss coins this as being the LOX's introduction to the people of them being on Bad Boy. This song, You'll See, would appear on the Bad Boy Entertainment Fall 96 sampler, which also contained the song All About the Benjamins. Upon signing, the group got pushed into this different lifestyle in which they described as Diddy was always celebrating something. The parties, girls, all that stuff, and the LOX were amazed by this. Something else to note is that just as they were about to sign with Bad Boy, Diddy changed their name to the LOX from the Warlocks because he felt like the Warlocks wasn't marketable, which I kinda understand. The members of the LOX didn't know much about marketing at the time and thought whatever Diddy said was golden, so they just went with it. Before the group would release a debut album, they had a string of features in which we're about to get into. The year is now 1997, and unfortunately, we know that Biggie would pass away in March of that year, and in the same month of his passing, the album Life After Death was released. The LOX would appear on the track Last Day, which sadly touches on how people live fast but end up dying young. And the LOX have also made a tribute track to Biggie. Some history behind this track is that Diddy commissioned Havoc of Mobb Deep to do a track. Back in those days, they recorded on reel-to-reel tapes, and somehow the original track got lost. Havoc to this day has no clue what happened to it, but he had another track that sounded similar to the one that we all have now. The final version is different, and this got Diddy pissed because he wanted the beat that he paid for, even though it got misplaced. But Diddy eventually got past this, and Havoc did the beat that we have today, so technically, the original version of Last Day is probably forever lost, sadly. but with the death of Biggie, left a huge part missing on Bad Boy. Now their biggest star was gone and somebody needed to take the reins, and now people like Mase, Black Rob, and the LOX were looked upon to step it up on the rap side. For those who already kind of know the story would know that Mase would actually take this lead and have massive success with his first album. But some other tracks the LOX did in 1997 was the official release of It's All About the Benjamins remix. Fun fact, Jadakiss actually wrote Diddy's verse for this song, so that's why it's so fire. But there's other songs that the members from the LOX have written, whether ghost or credited, especially when it comes to Styles P. What's interesting about It's All About the Benjamins is that Sheek and Jada hated the beat for this song initially, and Jada has said that Diddy kind of forced them to do that song. I think that the crew has grown to love that song, especially since it went on to peak at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. Another thing that some people might not know is that Missy Elliott was involved in the song. Missy wasn't impressed with Styles' verse, so it wasn't included in the song. However, the LOX weren't done with appearing on the charts, and Styles P did get to appear on another big record, as he would appear on the Mariah Carey song Honey, and that song would top the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and that song would end up getting nominated for a Grammy. Styles P would end up appearing on that track with Mase, and speaking of Mase, the LOX would appear on his song 24 Hours to Live, which would end up on his album Harlem World. So as you can see now, the LOX was building up a lot of buzz in 1997 with their features and the members of their group appearing on big songs. After Biggie's death, Mase was the first besides Diddy himself to release under Bad Boy, and like I said, his debut album was very successful. So now it was the LOX's turn. They would release their first single, If You Think I'm Jiggy, for their upcoming album. The track wouldn't make it to the Billboard Hot 100, but it did peak at number 36 on the Billboard Hot Rap Singles chart. The group needed something more bigger because their lead single didn't do too crazy on the charts, and Money, Power, Respect became their second single, and that song peaked at number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100. Such a classic track, and it had the streets on fire. I mean, you had the LOX, Lil' Kim, and DMX in 1998. I mean, come on. What's funny is that the LOX were initially scared to ask Lil' Kim to get on the hook because she was busy at the time. The album Money, Power, Respect would release in January of 1998, peaking at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. The album did really well, and now the LOX were on the board. They upped the score for Yonkers, but later on that year, DMX would up the score with Yonkers because in my opinion, I think that he had arguably the best year in hip hop history, which happened to be his quote unquote rookie year in the game. You would expect after the LOX's debut album and how successful it was that things would be all good and gravy, but issues would arise. For one, the LOX didn't like the shiny suit thing at this time that Bad Boy was known for. That just simply wasn't the LOX's style, and a single like If You Think I'm Jiggy just wasn't true to them. Sheek Louch has talked about how on Bad Boy they were watered down and Bad Boy's image was just flossy. The last straw with Diddy was when Styles P infamously threw a chair at Diddy during an argument. Styles P actually twisted his ankle during this incident. Prior to that, there were mumblings in the group about leaving, but that chair incident was the last straw that broke the camel's back. During this time period, the LOX had started the Free the LOX campaign that demanded Diddy to release them from their contracts. They had the shirts, and they were very vocal in public about wanting out. The LOX knew that they couldn't beat Diddy money-wise or lawyer-wise, so in Styles' words, they had to play mental chess. The LOX's assets were the people. Styles P had this to say about the situation. The moment with tossing the chair at Puff was a combination of being really effing stupid and really effing angry. I think for me, Big was always the barrier and the mediator and the middle person. He was always able to make things make sense to me. So I think when Big passed, it was just kind of really hard for me to deal with it and see certain things. The LOX didn't regret anything because it's a part of history, and there was quite a few artists who came to them afterwards and said that they wished that they would have did what they did. People gotta understand that Diddy didn't want to simply let them go because of the money invested into them, so the LOX had to force his hand. On top of that, Diddy is a businessman, so he wasn't just gonna let them walk. Diddy did an interview in 1999, and this is what he had to say about the LOX. The LOX situation, it just didn't work out. That's nothing new to any record company. Hopefully the press won't try to dramatize that. Any record label, and you have 20 acts, 1, 2, 3 of the acts aren't going to be happy. And it may be a situation that you can work out. We tried to work the situation out, it didn't work out. So we're in the process of selling them right now, and they are still to me some of the hottest rappers out. I wish them the best of luck. I'm sorry it didn't work out. So Diddy began shopping around the LOX, and this is where D and Wah come back into play. They already had a relationship with Diddy, and Diddy ended up shipping the LOX off to Rough Riders for $3 million. This won't be the last time we hear of Diddy in this story. So now the LOX were on Rough Riders, and D and Wah took them over to Interscope. Initially in the story, D and Wah weren't on yet when they first had the LOX, but by 1999-2000, they had DMX, who blew to be a superstar, and Eve, who had a very successful debut album at that point. Now the LOX were in a situation that suited their style way more. Before I wrap up this part of the video, I have to mention a few more songs. Going back a little bit, the LOX would appear on Dudes Done Started Something and Black Out with DMX, and Reservoir Dogs with Jay-Z. All of those songs were released in 1998 and are fan favorites. But back to 1999, and the LOX wasted no time and released the lead single, Ride or Die Girl, for the upcoming album. This song would peak at number 73 on the Billboard Hot 100. This will complete the first half of the video where I talked about the early career of the LOX and their time on Bad Boy. Now we'll get into the second half of their career. The LOX's second album, We Are the Streets, would be released in January of 2000. This album would peak at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 and be predominantly produced by Swizz Beatz. This album contains fan favorite songs like F You, Wild Out, Blood Pressure, etc. Something else to note is that on the song We Are the Streets, the LOX took some serious shots at Diddy. I mean, in the hook of the song, they're saying that we ain't with them no more because we're rough riding and the LOX are back. Jadakiss would say that the rhymes and beats were better, now they had less politics, and now the streets were involved with them. Styles P said that he wished that Biggie was alive and Diddy should have been killed instead, called him worse than a thief, and he said that Diddy has friends that hate him more than they did. The month after this album, the LOX would be a part of the Cash Money Rough Riders tour. At that time, the Rough Riders and Cash Money emerged as two of the hottest hip-hop labels in the industry, scoring 9 top 10 albums on the Billboard 200 albums chart between them. The Rough Riders released 4 number 1 albums alone, with 3 being DMX's and 1 being Eve's, and that's just number 1 albums, so this was a big deal. Now this tour has been covered in detail on the Rough Riders Chronicles, which you guys should definitely watch if you want to know more about it. I literally watched it for free. Episode 9 of season 1 to be precise. But simply doing this tour wouldn't be an easy task. The tour was just wild. Huge entourages, Seagram's, who was the sponsor for the tour, pulled out after several shows. People at a point in time were worried about getting paid, etc. But the real reason why I'm bringing up this tour is because of an event that happened in Boston that people would come for me if I didn't mention. Now this event that I'm about to talk about has been covered extensively through multiple interviews from all parties involved. So once again, if you want to know more about the information like that I'm about to talk about, it is easily accessible, but the 31st stop on the tour would be in Boston and there was a conflict. Now the story goes that this whole conflict started over a girl, and the Boston crew, the main men, were looking for DMX. They were waiting outside of DMX's dressing room, and X wanted to leave the room, but security wasn't letting him out. In the middle of all this, a brawl ensued. People were getting beaten up, people were stabbed, it was a big mess. But this wouldn't be the first time the LOX got involved in big brawls. Another notable brawl was the run-in with Trick Trick in Detroit, and even one time the LOX had a situation with Mike Tyson that wasn't a fight, but it is just a crazy story. They talked about it on the Drink Champs, and say it better than I could ever say it. But after 2000, the LOX didn't break up, but as you will see later on, they didn't release an album for years for multiple reasons. They were still a group, but each member went on to have a solo career, with Jada having the most successful solo run, as we would all know. The LOX altogether would appear on Jadakiss's debut album on the songs None of Y'all Better and It's Time I See You in 2001. For his sophomore album in 2004, they all appeared together on the song Welcome to D Block. In 2002, for Styles' debut album, they all appeared on the songs Lick Shots, We Thugs, and Nobody Loves Me. For Sheek's debut album in 2003, the LOX appeared on the song Don't Mean Nothing and Mighty D Block, Two Gun Salute. I didn't quite know where I wanted to go with this section of the video, since I do want to do a video on Jadakiss one day, and I want to leave some stuff out to tell his story a little bit more, but also in this video, I want to focus on the group and not get too much into people's solo discographies. Also, by 2003, things at Rough Riders weren't the same. Side note, just to mention, Styles P did a stint in prison in 2003, forgot to mention that somewhere, but this along with earlier on in the video when he got locked up as a teenager will be the only times I mention jail in their story, because it never really had a significant impact on like the history of the group. Like, I'm talking about just like all of them in the jail, but whatever. But Styles getting locked up in 2002, 2003 probably might have had an impact on what was supposed to be the LOX's third studio album at the time, but I'm not completely sure since it was still scheduled to come out sometime in 2004. But once again, by 2003, DMX was talking about retiring with his, at the time, fifth album that was initially called It's Not a Game. Drag On hadn't dropped in 3 years, and there was rumors that Eve wanted to leave the label and go back to Aftermath. She also wanted to get into the clothing thing and do movies. In the interview, Sheek said that it wasn't no beef and it wasn't over for the Rough Riders, but D Block Records would officially release its first record in 2003. D Block stands for discipline, dedication, and determination. Anything gangsta and gritty is D Block. D Block Records would start with the official release of Sheek Louch's album Walk With Me. But during this time period where the LOX didn't drop an album for years, they appeared on so many songs together that it's almost too many to count. You also got the freestyles they've done throughout the years and their appearances on mixtapes. It's almost like too much to cover in a way, naming them all. Speaking of the mixtape thing, the LOX really credit themselves as the people who really created the mixtape lane, and no artist truly did it how they did it until they saw what they did. I mean, for instance, people still eat up their stuff with DJ Clue and hold that stuff in high regard, and that's just one example when it comes to the mixtape stuff. Also, side note, there are 2 videos that I already have that like pretty much involve the LOX, but there's the Beanie Siegel and Jadakiss beef video, which I already covered, and the G-Unit vs. the LOX video, which like I recently did. So go check out those videos to learn more, and in my potential Jadakiss video, I plan to touch on some things I missed in that Beanie Jada video initially. Also in 2003, there were talks about a LOX album coming out in 2004 entitled Live, Suffer, and Celebrate. But as we know, that album never came out. But we get to 2005, and this is when Diddy comes back into the picture. The LOX would appear on Hot 97 in November of that year, I believe. Now, those who know about Diddy and Bad Boy have probably already heard stories about Diddy being shiesty. There's plenty of former artists that have talked about it, especially Mace, who I mean in the past has been very vocal about it. The LOX were on the radio talking about Diddy, and they wanted their publishing, which is very important because you can eat off that for years and in a good amount of cases for life depending on your catalog. The LOX claimed that Diddy owned 50% of their publishing, and Diddy said that he only owned 20% and had to that point only made $400,000 off of the LOX. But this argument on air got tense between Diddy and the LOX, with I think Jadakiss saying that he wanted to drop a refrigerator on Diddy. Here's a clip of the argument.
Now, you want people to stop talking because you just don't want to know the truth, dog. We made one record with you. Money, Power, Respect. It's 10 years later, and you still got half of our publishing. Now, there's no way you can make it justifiable that you said you deserve half of our publishing.
You to my face. We just at the concert. You ain't saying nothing.
What are we going to do saying it to your face? Get sued?
What do you want us to do? We can't touch. It's not. We can't be violent. None of that. We can't even.
You saying all this, dog? 2 years ago, levels in Miami.
Let's real recognize real. Y'all know where the office is at. There's a big sign on it. I'm gonna be there.
The whole National Guard's downstairs too. Cut it out, man. We can't talk
in this. I'm a grown ass man, man.
You're a coward.
And I don't take.
But not that long after this, Diddy got questioned about the situation, and he had this to say: "I would have signed that deal. But also, to keep it real, I would have been so on my business that I would have been at that office trying to make the deal better. Don't feel sorry for people that are lazy and then blame it on the other person. They are not on top of their business, but they need to get on top of it. Forget the beef, the talking reckless, sit down and handle it. Before you even meet with me, sit down with your accountant for 3 hours and go over your life. Manage your life. Sit at home by yourself and read your contract word for word. There are books that I have for them, like Publishing 101. But despite all of this, Diddy said that he had no problem with the LOX and was grateful with the time that he had with them. Not that long after this, they all worked it out. Diddy had wanted to meet up like men and not discuss it for other people's enjoyment, and before they ended up meeting, him and Styles talked on the phone. What followed was about an hour-long meeting that Styles said basically Diddy gave them all of their publishing back. Styles also said that Diddy didn't have to do that. But by 2005, a little before the Diddy situation, the LOX wanted to switch gears and focus on other things like D-Block because Jada and Styles were having problems with Interscope, which also kind of involves the whole G-Unit situation. Another event we could talk about is this J Hood situation. He was a D-Block artist that some felt like had a lot of promise, but there was issues about the release of his debut album. In 2007, he began to get very vocal about his situation and demanded to be released from his contract. J Hood cited that the LOX were in a similar situation with Diddy and hoped that the LOX wouldn't turn into Diddy in this situation and become hypocrites. He would also say that at the time, he had prepared numerous projects that were scheduled to be released before the end of the year just to show that the fans that it wasn't him that was the problem in this whole ordeal. Sheek Louch commented about his release in the interview and said that they would have let him off immediately until he jumped out the window. As an artist, he was just upset about the direction and how long he was taking for his album to come. He didn't know that there's a lot of other artists that ain't out yet, either like Papoose and other people that are on a bigger grind than him. There were a lot of songs that we wanted to put out. We thought they were hot to death, but a lot of people didn't. The DJs and other people were like, you gotta keep going until you get that one that pops. I guess he got people in his ear saying he should have sold 20 million records already. Now this whole J Hood and the LOX situation is like a 30-minute ordeal in itself, and I don't want to get too hung up talking about it, especially since I plan to talk about it in another video, and if I feel like I didn't go deep enough with it in that video, then I will do a complete video about the whole situation. But J Hood would diss the LOX and his members numerous times, whether it was in a song or in videos. J Hood did apologize, but I don't think that the two parties have been the same towards each other ever since. In 2009, the LOX would release the D-Block album No Security. This was supposed to introduce the many members that made up D-Block at the time. We'll skip to 2012, and Jadakiss would give information that the LOX were going to end the lockout and were going to close a new deal. I think that it should also be noted that Wu Block, which was a collab project between Ghostface Killah of the Wu-Tang Clan and Sheek Louch of the LOX, would release this year also. Jadakiss and Styles also make appearances on this album. In 2013, Jadakiss would do an interview with XXL and said that the LOX might receive an offer from MMG. He said that he was signed to Def Jam though for 3 or more albums. Side note, at this point in the story, Jadakiss was off Rough Riders and Interscope and now with Def Jam. Jadakiss would also add that MMG was one of the places that were inquiring about a new LOX album. Jadakiss finishes his comment saying that a LOX album was definitely coming. In December of that year, the LOX would release the Trinity EP. The next year, in November of 2014, they would release the Trinity second and third sermon. In 2015, the LOX would reunite with Diddy and Bad Boy and take part in the Bad Boy reunion after 2015 BET Awards. The LOX would also be a part of the Bad Boy Family Reunion tour, which took place in 2016. In December of 2016, the LOX would partner with Roc Nation to release their third studio album, Filthy America, It's Beautiful, pretty much almost 16 years after their last album. In 2017, the LOX were a part of the Rough Rider reunion tour. We can skip to 2020 and the LOX would release their fourth album, Living Off Experience. Their song, Bout Ish with DMX, is actually quite popular and a great song. Sadly, their dear friend DMX would pass away in April of 2021. This would be a big blow to the world of music and the LOX especially because of their relationship with DMX. I mean, think of all the songs the LOX alone have with DMX that are bangers. Just Crazy, RIP DMX. After this, there's only one more thing I really want to talk about, and it's the Dipset versus the LOX Verzuz. The LOX initially talked about battling groups like Mobb Deep, the Wu-Tang Clan, but we all know that they ended up battling Dipset. Personal feelings aside, I thought that Dipset would win, but I admit that I kind of underestimated the LOX. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, Styles and Sheek did their thing, but it was really Jada who took over, and if it wasn't for Jada, I don't think that what would have happened, and it would have been a huge moment like how it is. People were getting Jada and the LOX their flowers, and there was sort of this renewed interest in the LOX because of how successful their Verzuz was. They ended up getting a call from Kanye and would appear on his Donda album in the same year on the song Jesus Lord Part 2. This leads us to where we are today and the end of the video. But all in all, what do you guys think of the video? Let me know in the comment section below. I love you guys with all my heart. Peace.